So this week we're going to be talking about how to improve your supply chain, short term, medium term and longer term. Coming right up. Okay, so this week we're going to be talking about a few areas where you can improve your supply chain, and actually I've picked 9. So I've got a little bit of a note here with the 9 on, and we'll flash them up on the screen as we go along. Now I should add before we start, because someone's bound to say this, but Rob, you missed this bit or this bit. I'm just picking 9 out of potentially, a couple of dozen areas in your supply chain that you might want to improve. And just to kind of put things in perspective, let's just flash up on the screen a page from my website where I can show you in our consulting business all the different things that we tackle in the supply chain. So really, I'm just going to be talking about 9 that we've been doing a lot of recently with some of our consulting clients. So these are the things that they're finding really valuable, and that's what I want to share with you, because these are things that you ought to be looking at. Okay, so let's start off with short term. So first of all, it's got to be there, it's my favorite topic, cost to serve. And I should add, before we go through these 9 items, there are videos to all of these 9 on the channel. If I remember, I'll put links down below the video in the description. If not, just go to the various playlists or search on the channel. There are complete videos on each of these. So cost to serve, why is that important? It continues to be important. Pre-COVID, COVID, it's going to be important post-COVID. It is such a vital area of supply chain management that if you don't know what it's costing you to service different types of customers in different locations with different products, you are going to be leaking profit. And I won't go into the whole topic because there's separate videos on it. But if you don't understand cost to serve in your business, it's the quickest way to make improvements and really add to the bottom line very, very quickly. And it's an area that so many businesses miss because traditional reporting systems don't highlight the issues. So number 1, cost to serve. My second one for short-term focus would be in the warehouse. So if you're trying to improve productivity, particularly in the warehouse, a lot of our clients are trying to do that at the moment. One of the really simple techniques that you can do is actually product slotting. Now, if you've never come across product slotting, in simple terms, it's positioning all of your various products in the warehouse so that you minimize the pick path for the people picking the product, picking the orders. Why is that important? Because the further they have to travel, whether it be on forklifts or different types of machinery or walking, the further they travel, the longer it takes and productivity drops. So by slotting the products, and in simple terms, it's a question of working out your A, B and C lines, the fast, medium and slow movers, and generally putting most of the A's, the faster moving products, up nearer the dispatch area. There's a few techniques with it. You don't want to put them all together because otherwise your pickers are all going to be converging in the same aisles. But very simply put, your fast moving lines in your dispatch, then your next medium movers, and then your slow movers right down the back of the warehouse or higher. And what that does, it improves the pick path productivity by how much? 15 to 25% improvement in labour productivity. It is absolutely phenomenal. It is something you can do yourself. It's something that we can help with. There are specialist tools to do it, but hey, if you haven't got a complicated warehouse, you can do it yourself. You know which the fast movers are. So product slotting in your warehouse, definitely a good short-term one. The third one I've picked for short-term gains is your road freight. And 2 areas to look at there. One is the rate structure. And again, I've got videos on this. I've spoken about it recently. Make sure you're paying the right rate structure. And by that I mean, should you be paying per pallet, per kilo, per drop, per delivery, per truckload? What suits the profile of your freight best? Because you can actually spend way too much money if you're paying the wrong type of rate structure. People always think when I'm talking about rates that I'm talking about the actual dollar rate, the $20 per ton, the $30 per pallet or whatever. that's something that you obviously need to be aware of, and you need to be aware of what the market rates are, but it's the rate structure, the type of rate, which is far more important. And linked with that, with the rate, what's the performance of your road freight service providers? Do check on that. Are you actually getting the service that you're paying for? So there's 3 short-term ones. Let's now have a look at medium-term. These are in no particular sort of order of priority, but I've put sales and operations planning right at the top. It's right up there with cost to serve. Supply chain is really all about product availability and efficiency, and if you aren't undertaking sales and operations planning in your business, you need to, because it's a key enabler of all of that. And again, you'll find videos on the channel about S&OP, sales and operations planning. In a nutshell, what's it about? It's a discipline, it's a communication process across all different functions of the business so that everybody is sharing information and working off the same set of numbers. So the demand numbers, the supply numbers, you know, all the different departments are sharing that so you can actually balance supply and demand. And it's absolutely critical in managing your inventory properly, managing your service levels properly. So that is my first one on medium term. Second one, I'm going to come back to the warehouse, and this time I'm going to talk about capacity. So many companies I've spoken to in the last 12 months or so have real capacity issues in their warehouse. And in fact, I was looking at one yesterday. In fact, not yesterday, this week. I was looking at 2 who have capacity issues. One was electronic goods, and one was electrical components. Both quite big warehouses, quite an extensive range of products, but both running out of capacity. For one, the answer was going to be to move longer term. They're really just running out of space. But for the other one, they didn't really want to move. They had quite a long lease still left on their warehouse. There was a bit of space still in the warehouse, and what we're going to work on with them is maximising the use of that space, maximising the cube of that warehouse. So what do I mean by that? There's some very simple things that you could do medium term. We've done lots and lots of these with different types of companies. You can do things like get your storage systems, your racking a little bit higher so that you're maximising all of the clear height in the warehouse. Very often you'll find operations going on in the warehouse where it's all happening at ground level and nothing is really being utilised above. I'm going to take sort of receipt and dispatch out of that. I wouldn't be saying to put things above those operations, but there can be, you know, simple manufacturing going on, kitting going on, and there's nothing above those operations. So you can start to think about things like mezzanines. Another way to really boost the capacity of a warehouse is to look at aisle widths. And we've done this with a number of companies. You know, you can have very wide aisles, maybe 3.5 metre aisles, and you might be able to get away with narrower aisles. Sometimes you need to change the type of machinery you're using, forklifts. So if you've got normal reach trucks, you might swap to turret trucks, or they've got articulated forklift trucks now, which actually bend in the middle, which are really good. So all of this sort of equipment can operate in narrower aisles. So you might be able to go from 3.5 to 3 to 2.5, even down to 2. The impact that that can make on a warehouse is significant because you can actually shuffle all your racking along and get in extra rows of racking. We've done this with a number of clients, as I mentioned, and one company was very smart. They actually started doing this over the weekends. And they'd have a crew come in one weekend and they'd kind of move 3 rows of racking, you know, put the product back in, work through the week, and then they'd come in the next weekend, move another 3 rows of racking. Worked superbly, and they got something like a 30% increase in capacity. And they went from reach trucks to these articulated forklift trucks, because you might be watching this and thinking, but Rob, when you reduce the aisles too much, everything slows down a little bit. You know, you've got to be a little bit more careful, and so productivity slows down. Going just from reach trucks to the articulated forklift trucks didn't make a lot of difference, and it was worth it to get all the capacity. So that's my second medium term. My third medium term, I'm going to mention outsourcing. So we could talk about freight or warehousing, whatever. I would say review contracts and performance. So we've been doing a lot of these this year, where, you know, companies are trying to contain costs. They want to make sure they're getting the right service level. So either they're having a really good look at their current existing outsourcing contracts, or they're actually going to the market and seeing what better services or better costs they could come up with. One of the things I always mention when we're talking about outsourcing is please don't just go out to the market as a benchmarking exercise. I really don't think that's kind of fair or ethical. There are other ways to benchmark the costs rather than making everybody go through an RFT process. So only do that if you're serious about trying to find out what other offerings there are in the market, what different types of services might suit you and that type of thing. But definitely outsourcing, have a look at the contracts and the performance. So that's the medium term. Longer term, what might you look at? Oh, I suppose someone's going to ask what's short, medium and long term. Short term, I would say, is maybe up to 6 months. Medium term, I'm just looking at the capacity things, maybe 6 to 9, 6 to 12 months. Longer term, probably 12 months plus. So longer term, what are we going to look at? Definitely supply chain strategy. And yes, again, you'll find videos on the channel all about this. Why is that so important? Because so many companies still don't have a clearly documented supply chain strategy. And you might be saying, well, so what, Rob? Well, imagine, I'm not sure where you're watching this from, what part of the world. So let's just say you're watching a football game of some sort. Might be, American football, soccer, Aussie rules, whatever, hurling. Imagine you're taking your team, your football team, onto the pitch, and there's no game plan. Which way are we kicking? Oh, we'll play it in that direction. What's the plan? That's kind of what it's like having a supply chain without a supply chain strategy. So, yeah, look, everybody knows that we've got to try and deliver on time. We've got to try and keep the cost down, but there's a lot more to it than that. What's the business strategy? What's the business trying to achieve? And what can the supply chain be doing to help deliver those business outcomes? You've got to get into that sort of depth in your supply chain strategy and be very specific. It doesn't need to be a long exercise. As you'll see if you look on some of the other videos, I often do this with clients and we come up with a one-page strategy. 3 or 4 objectives, some key enablers, the things that are going to help us achieve those objectives, some KPIs, and away we go. And suddenly, people are much more aware of what we're trying to focus on. Sorry, I'm just looking at the timer on here because I did a video last week and this camera has a maximum of 30 minutes on it. And suddenly the camera went blank. So we're okay for time. So supply chain strategy. My second one for longer term would be distribution networks. And again, I'm mentioning this because so many companies ask for help doing this. Why is it worth looking at a distribution network? Heck, I think we've done a couple of dozen already this year, and I'm just trying to think of what prompted companies to look at that. It was expansion of business, increasing volumes in different channels, particularly e-commerce, acquiring other businesses. So their distribution environment was changing. They were sending out more. They were sending it out through different distribution channels. The business was growing substantially. There's been some phenomenal growth over the last year or two. And companies really just want to pressure test what their distribution network looks like. Does it still make sense to have our warehouses in these locations? I'm starting one next week for a European-based company where the question really is for them, we've got our warehouse contracts, our 3PL contracts coming up for renewal in about a year's time. Does it still make sense for us to have this number of warehouses in these locations? Or with the change in our demand patterns, does it make sense to put warehouses in different locations and different sizes and things like that? That's really what all that distribution network design and modelling is about. So that is definitely something you should look at. Even just do a bit of a whiteboard session. Get some of your colleagues together and say, well, okay, look, this is what our network looks like now. How has that changed over recent years? How is the demand changing? Is this still going to be okay? Is this still going to serve us in the right way for the future? So distribution network is definitely another one. Now, the last one won't be a surprise to you. We've got to include this: sourcing and supplier management. Why is that so important? Sourcing has become really tricky over the last couple of years in supply chain, and every time we watch the news or pick up a newspaper, there seems to be some other sourcing related issue, whether it be ocean freight impacting sourcing, whether it be the ability of countries that have traditionally been high source locations struggling. So you really need to be on top of that in the longer term, and looking at, do you have your strategic suppliers well engaged? Do you have secondary suppliers ready to come online? We always recommend that those secondary suppliers, you're sourcing a little bit from them anyway, just so the relationship is working, the processes are working, so that if you have issues with a primary supplier, you can switch more to a secondary supplier. Are you thinking about which parts of the world that you're sourcing from? You know, things are pretty dynamic at the moment. How's that going to look at for the future? And supplier management generally. So, you know, do you have really good supplier management protocols in place? Are you very closely managing those strategic suppliers, and do you have good performance reviews and KPIs and so on for the rest? So that would definitely be my third one for longer term. So as I mentioned, we've got 3 short term, 3 medium term, 3 longer term. I could easily add 10 more to each of those, but these I think are the ones that a lot of people are focusing on at the moment, and making sure that they're getting these right. And these are also the ones, of course, that the sort of changing face of supply chain at the moment is having the greatest impact on. Now I'm going to mention 2 more, and we're going to put them along the bottom. And what are these ones? Well, I'm going to mention 2 that are really important, and it doesn't matter short, medium or longer term. And the first one of those is training and education. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this on social media, LinkedIn and Facebook and so on over the coming weeks. But training and education is just a vital component. It's a vital thing to focus on for your supply chain teams. More so than ever before in the history of supply chain management, I would argue, has it been so important for your teams to be well trained, well educated, have the knowledge to adapt, to be flexible, to really understand what they can do to help tweak and improve the supply chain. And you can't just learn all of that on the job. So I would urge you to look at what's out there, whether it be short courses, long courses, online education programs. Really invest in your people. Heck, get them watching this YouTube channel. Get them broadening their understanding of supply chain, and particularly the interrelationship of different functions. Because I think in any business sphere, in any business function really, it's understanding how those different functions should fit together that's really important, so that you don't get, let's say, procurement doing one thing which is creating havoc further down the supply chain, or you haven't got distribution doing one thing which is totally wrecking what procurement and inventory management are trying to do. So it's having that understanding of the whole supply chain, which I think is really important. So I can remember many years ago, in an organisation that I was working in, they had a policy of training people for 2 positions up. So we were always trained to do our boss's job in case the boss wasn't there, and then we were being groomed to do that boss's job. So think about that in terms of your people. And that second one that I want to mention that you should always be looking at is benchmarking. And that brings me right back to the first item really, cost to serve. Why is cost to serve so vital? Because very few companies have visibility of the cost to serve, the profitability of individual customers and products. Benchmarking is kind of that on steroids, where you can look at every single aspect of your supply chain, compare the costs of your supply chain with others, compare the individual performance, the metrics and so on with others. And it's a fantastic way to see how you're performing compared to others in your industry and even other industries. And any time I've been involved with benchmarking with companies, it's been an enormous impact and impression on them. And I have never yet seen it done where there haven't been a few jaws dropping and sort of going, wow, we thought we were okay at that. But clearly, we're well below average, and here's the opportunity to catch up. So it's a great process whereby you can look at where's the key elements where there's an opportunity for you to improve, either on cost or service. So we'll kind of end with those two underlying ones, training and education and the benchmarking, because I think they're important, whatever time frame you're looking at. So there we go. Bit of a longer video this week. I just wanted to share some thoughts on, what kind of things you ought to be looking at in your supply chain at the moment. The sort of easy wins, maybe, particularly with some of those short-term ones. So I did only mention 9. Which of those do you think makes sense to you? Which one are you already working on? Or has it prompted you to think, yes, I might look at that? Or maybe you've got another one, not one of the 9 short, medium, longer term ones that I've looked at. What's really important to your supply chain that you're going to be working on in the next 12 months or so? So there we go, a little bit of food for thought. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.